All right, so we are in our 24th episode of Yobo Live. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, let me first explain what Yobo Live is. It basically stands for You Only Be School Once. Uh, and truly so because we believe that ye B school milegi na dobara. Well, for the pre-Christmas day, I think we have a perfect episode lined up for you. I mean, who else would be busier than the elves of Amazon sending gifts at your doorsteps as modern Santa now more than ever? Or who would you bank on to get your favorite Christmas cake delivered? Well, a lot of times we don't get to see the people responsible for keeping this supply and flow going. And thus, we are going to talk today to B School students who have bagged PPO roles in varied companies in supply chain and operations domain. I welcome this all male panel of Yobo Live today, which in no way means that there are not enough women taking up operation roles. Today we have Sudhama from XLRI who has cracked the PNG PPO. Abhijit again is from XLRI who has a PPO from Reckitt Benckiser. For those who don't know Reckitt Benckiser, I'll just name two names. You will know what I'm talking about: Durex and Dettol. Yeah, that's RB. Naveen from NITI Mumbai is placed with Nestlé. Harshit is an MDI student. He has a PPO with Amazon, the one that I mentioned in my initial talk. Mayank is also from MDI, who has a PPO from Mars. And lastly, we have Akshay from FMS, who is a true blue supply chain guy here with a PPO from GEP. Welcome, all of you, and thanks for joining us today. All right. Uh, so before we begin, guys, first tell us how you guys are holding up. It's been a crazy year. It's been, a lot of things that we have not anticipated and expected. And supply chain, for one factor, has been affected a lot. The fact that you guys have chosen this as a career option tells a lot of things about the promise that you might have seen. And given the situation, given the conditions that we have had this time around, how did you guys feel taking this decision that I want to do a supply chain management kind of education, and I want to have a career in this? Abhijit, I want you to take a stab at it very briefly. How you have dealt with this entire situation, and what do you think has affected you?
Okay, sure. Thanks a lot for this opportunity, Paul. When you talked about you only B school once, I can say no one B schools like us. The virtual way in which we took up, and we all took up internship with supply roles just when the lockdown started. So the kind of experience we had with internship would have also been very different. I'm very sure. Everyone in the supply vertical was very busy, and a lot of issues on how to deal with these supply the things that were going on. Everything was very, very different. Even my mentor didn't know what to give me. I had a project charter, but how to go about it? Will it be useful at all? We'll get a generic project charter on what to do, or maybe something very specific, which was given, a month before my internship started. But every single month, the government comes up with new regulations during the entire lockdown period, and it changes. And ultimately, it seemed like whatever we did might end up being obsolete, or won't be used at all. So that was very tough time. I never really got to interact with a lot of people in the initial phases because everyone was so busy. They were just in firefighting mode, how to ensure that. And especially since, like you said, Dettol, its sanitizers was most sought after at that point of time. And there was a huge supply crunch for the same. So it was a very, very tough tussle going on during the entire time. But at the same time, I think I strongly believe conflicts are the time to learn a lot and gain a lot too. And I think I got the best exposure that any other batch could have got in the same place. It was very difficult to reach out to people, but they made sure that they could somehow, it might be like at 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. at night also, people made time to connect with me and let me know that this is what's going on, this is how you must move forward. They made me feel comfortable, which was to a large extent very helpful. And I did learn a lot. It was an amazing experience, very tiring, but it was really good. I think the pandemic helped a lot in my learning curve.
Right, absolutely. Akshay, do you also have something similar to share with us? Because we all have seen and experienced a different kind of pandemic. Everybody has their own kind of responses to how they have dealt with it. Anything that you have seen?
Right, Paul. So my experience would be a bit different because I was working with a consulting firm. So that was the best time for a consulting firm because literally projects were flowing in. And it was a bad time for an intern because it became very challenging, right? Because our mentors, our managers, everybody would be occupied. So barely you could get a 15-minute connect. So ideally in an offline setting, you could just go there, find time and talk to them. In an online setting, it was extremely difficult. And in a consulting project, ideally you are responsible for your entire module. So you're supposed to do everything independently, and with limited help, it was one hell of a ride. But in the end, obviously, you get a lot of support from people, and eventually you do manage. And lucky I was able to manage. But yes, it was a good time for the learning perspective because there was a lot of new projects and a lot of things to learn.
Right. Harshit, I'll come to you very quickly. What has been the pandemic and the post-pandemic kind of a experience for you? Very quickly.
Talking specifically, I mean, the pandemic had just sort of started and everything, I mean, everyone can sort of relate to this that, when the lockdown started, everyone's thinking that, okay, in another couple of weeks, we'll have everything open and then we'll be back to business as usual. But, we all know how that transpired. And, when that was happening in the middle of our internship, a lot of our experiences were that, we were stuck between two places on whether to go about this, is assuming that we were going to do everything online or to sort of map out and complete all the work that can be done online and then leave all the offline part for the last thing. And when all of that happened, in the middle of something, I think I was fortunate enough to take that decision that maybe, just maybe, we'll have the entire internship virtual. And once I had that clarity in mind, it became slightly easier. But at the same time, again, like the challenges that Abhijit also mentioned, everyone was super busy, specifically in supply chain, because, when it's business as usual, they are busy. But when you have exigencies arising out of what products are allowed when, and, then there are different checks at different state borders and everything, it just sort of adds another level of complexity, which is, sort of unexpected. And, at that particular point of time, I remember I almost spent the entire week just trying to reach out to my mentor that, okay, this is expected. And every day we'll have a call at around 1 a.m. at the night. And it was, something on his part as well. He had taken up this extra work and he sort of took out time after everything was done to sort of guide me towards my project as well. Post pandemic, I can appreciate this because, in everything that, any particular supply chain intern would go through in a year is about training you for business as usual. But, what we got trained for was, when externalities are at an all time high. So, you just sort of learn to handle anything and everything that comes your way. It was a great experience this year, but I think next year onwards, it's going to be very different for other people, hopefully.
Right. Sudhama, I'll come to you with a different question now. Let's get back a little bit and start from the beginning. When do you actually know that you are cut out for a supply chain kind of a role, and that's where you want to get invested in? That's where you want to invest your time and get into a sector which has its own promises.
Yeah, so basically, I'm a mechanical engineer and worked in as manager operations. So I was looking after factory operations for Tata Steel. So supply chain was somewhere a natural choice to me, operations and supply chain. But the bigger question was whether it is MBA or not. When we, because like most of the work we were doing there was technical, but somewhere we were not having that exposure. We were not part of various decisions which company was making. We were just like asked to do things. So that is where somewhere like which motivated like not only me, many of my colleagues who's like we started preparing for MBA just to understand the broader perspective. And from there on, supply chain was was a natural progress, I can say.
Right. Naveen, I would like to come to you. This whole one that it's a all male panel that we are having today, and except from me, all of you guys are engineers. Why so? And why do you think engineers choose and love supply chain so much?
Exactly cannot be told that all engineers love supply chains. We are seeing engineers in supply chain domain, in the marketing, in the finance domain, and probably each and every engineer is excelling in his or her field of choice. So coming to your question, when it comes to me, probably I and Sudhama, we share a common background. So I'm also a mechanical engineer from Jadavpur University, and post which I had a work experience for 2 years in Vedanta Limited. So I was looking after the mechanical maintenance. So as he rightly said, supply chain and operation came as a natural choice to me because most of the work that I did, whether it be procuring from a certain vendor, whether it be the right choice, whether it be calculating downtime, whether it be inventory planning, right? So most of these activities were done by me on frequent basis. So, but once I came into NITIE and got an exposure of all these jargons, really great jargons, then I actually came to know that okay, so this is what I was doing back when I was working. So that link between my what I was actually studying and what I used to do, that the bridging and the transition was very smooth, and I did not. So it was not exactly something really very new or that I was learning, and hence that was a really great experience.
Right. Mayank, I'll quickly come to you now. I would like to know, Mayank, what are the kind of attributes that I should have to have a perfect career in supply chain? Is there a magic wand or is there a magic potion that can help you, have a brilliant career and get into a brilliant company and work as a supply chain person there?
So I won't say that there's some perfect, solution or perfect attributes that can be there. But if I have to list, say, two or three of them, I feel that one should be good, with his or her analytical skills. One, and second, he or she should be, able to influence a wider group of people, because when you're working in supply chain, you're not just working, say, or operations for that matter. You're not just working as an individual contributor, but you're working as a team. And then you have, say, if you're on the plant, then you have a team of, say, uh, people working on the shop floor, or different stakeholders or different departments functions to deal with. And same goes with supply chain as well. So I think you should have some good people skills, as well as an ability to influence a wider group of people.
Right. Okay. Abhijit, I'll come back to you. You mentioned very well that with every crisis comes an opportunity for learning. Uh, beyond that learning, what are the few things that a person who is interested in having a career in supply chain should keep in mind, from B school, whatever learning that you are getting, beyond that, what are the kind of on ground learning that is very important for somebody to, acquire to, excel in this field?
Okay, so I think it's important to understand why I chose supply chain to answer that question. So when I came to campus, I was a fresher and I had no idea what I was about to do next. And it often happens that if you are if you get decent marks in a subject, you will tend to get attracted to it. And if you don't get marks in a subject, you just don't want to study that anymore. So that kind of happened with me. And then I came across this article that talked about, most of the CEOs of Fortune 100 companies come from the operations role. And who doing an MBA doesn't want to become a CEO of a Fortune 100 company? So that's how I started exploring operations. I liked it. Like skills is required, and understanding that you are not working in that silo, but at a broader organization with others is very important, because I personally feel the supply side, the operation side in MBA is the most technical aspect of vertical in an MBA. A lot of numbers, a lot of technicalities, process oriented, and so on. And it's very easy that when we are learning all this, we tend to restrict ourselves into a silo, into just that, and not look at the broader business perspective. So moving forward from that, I strongly feel it is very important to see how operations and supply affect business, how you're enabling business rather than you being business itself. Because everyone knows ultimately sales is the end of a business, but you should see yourself as a business enabler. And while moving forward, see everything that you do as enabling a business, and how will you be doing things differently, or how you would affect the business differently, and moving forward, how the business strategy affects operations and so on. I think those are some key aspects that if you see yourself, will be very interesting. You will really want to work, and you will see that working in this way is different. It will probably help you gain more expertise, or it will improve the process. But will it ultimately lead to all the business aspects, or will it enable the vision of the business, is something completely different. So having the holistic perspective helps a lot, and it's very interesting if you see it from that perspective than just the technical aspects of operations.
Right. Absolutely. I think it's very important to see it from a different perspective and not just the technical perspective. And Akshay, I want to know, as Abhijit mentioned, the being the enabler of a kind of organization that you're working on. Uh, what exactly does being an enabler means, and what are the kind of skills that you need to develop on the go to become an enabler and take decisions on the go. When there is a crisis like situation, there are moments when you are on your own and you are acting like a CEO for a particular brand or a company or anything of any decision that you have to make on the go. How do you become that enabler?
Right, Paul. So, Paul, first of all, my perspective will be very different because I wasn't exactly in a supply chain role, but it was more of a consulting role, right? So, when I talk about the skill sets in consulting, that will be pretty much similar to what you need in, let's say, a strategy consulting firm. It's primarily your problem-solving skills and your communication skills, right? Communication both in terms of verbal and as well as, presentation part, right? That's what's important. Now, if we talk about the enabler part for a consultant, so in case of supply chain consulting firm, there's a lot of operational work as well. It's not just strategy work, you're just designing, giving recommendations. You actually go there. Projects are long-term in nature. So you have to actually understand the entire process. And now because your projects will be very short-term, right? You'll be working for 6 months on a project, you'll be working for 1 year on a project. So you have to understand the entire process, understand the flow, and maybe identify the bottlenecks where you're trying to help the client. And the kind of projects you get in consulting are usually around, let's say, cost optimization, understanding organizational risks, maybe improving the efficiency. So they are mostly broader in nature. So you don't really get into the nitty-gritties, but you look things from the larger perspective and see how you can go about making changes and improving the function. Sometimes when you are actually in the operations, you do not understand from the larger picture. Say maybe I'll give you an example of, let's say, an RB. They have multiple manufacturing facilities, right? Now they might have different vendors, different supply for each facility, but at a holistic level, if you maybe consolidate that spend, maybe take one large supplier, there might be lost a lot of opportunities with respect to the cost. So those kinds of enabling functions consulting does.
Right. So from FMCG, FMCD, and a consulting kind of a role that Akshay mentioned, Harshit, I want to come to the e-commerce side of things. How does it, differ from each other? When I'm, in my first year of uh, B school, I don't know much about, the nitty-gritties of it. Then how do I understand how a supply chain operations in an FMCG, how does that work, and an e-commerce platform, how does that work?
To be very frank, Paul, I think it's largely just research. But to be very frank, when you look at e-commerce supply chain and you look at different externalities, so you're reaching out to the end customer at that's your objective. It's not just about reaching out to your channel partners to sort of handle very limited number of endpoints, customer touch points. Here, every customer is a customer touch point. So that in e-commerce is something that is very unique. Last mile logistics, as we call it.
Okay,
So
I don't
when
understand.
you
I
talk
don't understand
specifically
when
about
you say
last mile.
customer touch point. I would like you to go deeper into it
Mhm,
and make people understand
mhm.
what you are actually referring to.
Okay, so let's consider from this point of view. If you're an e-commerce company, someone orders something from your app, right? And your end goal is to deliver that product to the customer, right? But when you talk about FMCG logistics, you end up delivering it to, let's say, a Kirana store or a modern trade store. That's your end goal to get to your distributor, and then he handles the logistics going forward. So, you don't entirely that last mile part, the reaching to the customer, as I'm calling it, the customer touch point specifically. So that is something that is unique to e-commerce, that your every customer is your customer touch point. So your end goal is to get it to the end of the supply chain, as it would be. That is when the consumer ends up consuming it, right? So that is something that's unique with e-commerce, and that is where a lot of challenges lie as well. Last mile logistics, and that is something that's different. So when you're trying to go for that specifically, everyone in e-commerce is trying to tackle what challenges with respect to last mile logistics, and how to sort of, specifically in a country like India, when you have a specific pin code to deliver to, and for a fact that you don't have reliable location coordinates there. The coordinates might be different, and you might reach that specific location and you'll end up with completely new challenges. Ki, is building mein hai kahan par, matlab, where exactly do I deliver? So those challenges, when you sort of consider what how chaotic that can be, and to sort of formalize and create mechanisms for that, that is where the real challenges lie in e-commerce. So I think that is something that is slightly different. But I think, someone who's done his internship in FMCG would be better able to sort of talk about how it's different in an FMCG company. I might not be that well equipped to answer that.
Right. And I was coming to you, Naveen, for that. I would like you to take a stab on that, and then we can move on with other people who are in the FMCG sector. But Naveen, why don't you, get
Yeah,
into it?
sure. Basically, what Harshit said is actually right. So it's basically the design of the supply chain that is different between an FMCG and in e-commerce, and it's the last mile delivery which matters for e-commerce, and it's top priority basically. But when it comes to supply chain of an FMCG, most of the FMCGs have a very standard supply chain. So the product moves from the factory to a warehouse, from the warehouse to a cash distributor, from the cash distributor to a retailer or modern trade or whatever the kirana. So this is a very basic layout of an FMCG, right? So the basically the kind of bottlenecks or the kind of, so it's entirely when it depends on the product. So for example, if a supply chain is a cold supply chain, the product that is being moved is more of an ice cream or a dairy product. So the kind of bottlenecks that the supply chain faces at that point of time, it differs. So the number of touch points or the number of nodes in a supply chain, right? As I mentioned, right, warehouse, then the cash distributor. So when it comes to the a dairy cold supply chain, that the number of nodes in that supply chain should actually be a minimum, so that the shelf life is preserved. But when it comes to a normal, suppose it when it comes to Maggie, right? So when it comes to Maggie, it's more or less we have got enough time to move the product from the factory to.
Yeah, I would just like to pitch in one more thing. Something that Naveen said sort of brought one more thing to my mind. So, for an FMCG, shelf life of the product is something that's very, very important, right? So specifically for e-commerce, one more thing that is very different is that, you have a wide range of what the shelf life of the product is, right? Because you can have electronics that might be good for next 6 months because for entirely different reasons as opposed to, something that is consumable. So that's something that's very different. So your range of shelf life is another added complexity in e-commerce that sort of comes into play. So you would have a completely different supply chain design, or priorities on how to deliver it, how quickly to deliver it, depending on what your product is. If it's something that's, let's say, for something like Amazon Fresh, that's consumable, that might just have a shelf life of 2 days. Your design would be completely different from something that can stay on the shelf for 6-8 months, right? So that also sort of.
Absolutely, absolutely. Harshit, thank you for that response. Sudhama, I want to move to you with a question that we have gotten from Akansha Singh. Akansha is asking that, there are several industries in supply chain placement is a chance in not so premier B school. How to be prepared for every company that brings in good opportunity? Uh, do you want to take a stab on that?
Sure. So for someone who is already having some kind of experience in manufacturing or supply chain domain, I think be perfect with whatever you have done during your work ex, and that should be fine. Okay. But for someone who is not having relevant work experience, uh, what I personally feel is like you guys should work on showing the company that you are interested. Maybe go ahead and do 1 or 2 certification, maybe a green belt certification, or like CIA have some kind of certifications in logistics. So when you go ahead and do, like, it gives you some kind of background before, and it also gives you some kind of understanding, like how this domain is there and what are the opportunities and all. So one thing is like it will give you exposure, and the second thing is it shows like you are interested in this particular domain. And when you go out and sit in an interview, I think it's completely up to you, like how you will convince them. uh, yeah.
Sorry. Mayank, I would move to you with another question that we have gotten from Rohit. Rohit is asking, how does the CV look like for a supply chain ops shortlist? So he wants to know very specifically what have you put in your CV that has helped you, or maybe to get noticed and stay afloat in all that other CV pool that companies get in.
When it comes to CV, I think it is more to do with your work experience. And if like Sudhama already mentioned that if you have work experience, then it's completely different than when you're fresher. So if you have work experience, you should be able to put your work in such a way that influences or puts it out loud that this is what you have done and this is the impact that it had. And so suppose, for example, if you were working in a manufacturing firm, you can say this is what I did, and this I was able to save this much amount of money, or I was about to improve the efficiency, say from X% to Y% in that way. So if you're putting a lot of numbers, that definitely helps you get noticed. But then again, you need to be very concrete and very sure about whatever you have done in order to achieve that. Apart from that, yeah, you can do some certifications. So there's Six Sigma Green Belt certification that you can do. Apart from that, CII, like Sudhama already mentioned. So I don't think there's much, from a CV point of view that I would suggest. But yeah, from a fresher, uh, I think to add to a previous question, this will probably add to a previous question as well. If somebody has to prepare for placements, he or she has to see what all are the roles when it comes to supply chain or operations, because more or less we are around that it's just logistics or it's just working in a plant. But supply chain and operations is much more than that. There's planning, there is a lot of customer excellence. So there are a lot of things that come along with it.
Right. Abhijit, I'll move to you again. There are a few things that we take care of before the summer placements start, which are customary, like making a CV and putting your best foot forward. Along with that, anything, that you should be doing to impress the companies who are coming in to get the best role possible. And anything of that sort that you have, done in your time when the summer internships actually took place.
Right. Okay. As the questions were being raised, I'm a fresher. Okay. And typically I've heard a lot of people tell me also that maybe, when the companies come and offer multiple roles, don't apply for ops, go for marketing. And so on. I've heard that a lot. And it is true that people with work ex tend to get a land ops role more than the others. But on the other hand, if you really are interested, then the efforts must show with the things that you read about operations and the way you notice certain things. So once you set your mind on ops, I just started noticing certain things and I started reading more on it and about the companies that come to campus itself. So once I did that, I had a strong belief that the biggest hurdle for a fresher to land an ops role is the CV shortlisting. Beyond that, the only thing that you will have to do is make sure that the way you approach a problem, especially the GDs, in a very structured manner. Make sure that I want to say these things. I think these are the problems. I think these need to be the solution. Not too, you should not be too aggressive. You just put your points across. Make sure that it is being supported by data or some report. So read up a little more on that. What they essentially want to see, I feel, is that you take a structured approach to anything and make sure that you end at the result that is feasible. Feasibility is one of the biggest aspects that they look for, and structure in the same. Secondly, like I said, the biggest hurdle is coming to the CV. And yes, so like Mayank and Sudhama said, certifications help. Lean Six Sigma, if it's being offered in your college, will help. Getting good grades will definitely help if you want to put that in your CV. Maybe if you get A plus in few of the ops subjects offered in your first year, and if your placement committee lets you put that in, that also helps. But this definitely helps, but keeping that all aside, I didn't do any of these. I was too lazy to do the Six Sigma course because it came in the first term, which I later realized was an issue. But what I did do is make sure that I did a few projects, few certifications that were freely available. I made sure that my interest came forth in the CV. I highlighted those words that made sure that they know that I am more process oriented. I am interested more in delivering long-term impacts than making sure that something works in the short term. I think that is what helped me a lot, because I know one other person, one other fresher who interned in ops role with Johnson and Johnson, and I think that is also what helped her out. I'm not very sure, but I think I'm very sure that this is what helped me because I don't have the perfect profile for an ops role.
Right. Uh, Harshit, I want to know, there's another question that has come in, how to prepare for e-commerce companies specifically for supply chain and operations role. I mean, this is a question from Gitansh Malik who's asking this, and this is in lieu with what I was asking Abhijit before as well. What did you do?
See, for an e-commerce supply chain role, even I don't know how to tell you how to prepare for it because like delivery or logistics that sort of offers such sort of a role. So when you go about it, approach can be completely different because specifically you during your summer placements you won't get a lot of technical questions because even companies sort of realize that you're just 3 months into your MBA, so there's not going to be a drastic difference in between what you knew before your MBA and what you know right now, right? So when that happens, it sort of becomes important to realize what's important for that particular e-commerce company. For example, a company like Amazon that I interned with, having that bias for action on, insisting on highest standards, it's something that's very important. So you sort of read about what the, values of that company, specifically with respect to how they operate in, the logistics and supply chain functions. And you sort of map that and realize how do you fit into that particular mold or not. And if you do, you sort of just need to justify that in the interview. That's specifically what worked for me in Amazon. And there are other companies like Flipkart as well, they sort of interview the same way. But then, you would have a few roles that might ask you a few technical questions. So you need to be at least have that basic idea of how supply chain works. And it's not that difficult to sort of, not deep dive into that, but just sort of skim through the surface to at least know from a macro standpoint, how does everything work. So if you at least have that, the interview would also have something that, you do have that particular interest, which is much more than, what someone sort of tends to say in an interview. You tend to say that you're interested in that specific company while you might not, but if you showcase it through a particular thing, specifically when you're saying, okay, I went the extra mile and, learned about how this works in your company. So that would sort of help you in the interview. So do your research specifically about how that company works, how it functions, and it'll help you specifically in your summer placements.
Right. On this note, I would like to mention this to all the people who's watching this. Do ask your questions. We'll pick up certain questions and then we'll try and get them answered from the panel that we have today. Moving on, Naveen, Sudhama, I want your take on this. You both are in companies like P&G and Nestle, respectively. What exactly was the kind of that day like when you actually gotten to P&G and Nestle? What were some of the things that you kept in mind? Were there moments during the interview where you felt that ye to mere se nahi ho payega? Because there are a lot of other companies that you're also trying out for, and then something happens and you have that in mind that this I think I have scored well, and I've fared well. Naveen, you can start. Yeah.
Well, so since I had a relevant work experience in the industry, so preparing the CV and using the right jargons that are important for a supply chain role was not that difficult for me as compared to. And so when I got the Nestle shortlist, so the GD was more or less okay. GD was quite easy, and I got to it. But when it came to the first round of personal interview, so most of my interview was structured around my work experience. And the best part about the interview was the person who was interviewing me was trying to know my viewpoint about a certain topic. So, for example, so I'm being very very particular here. So so I looked after the coal mill in the power plant. So probably the people who are pretty much aware about the process in the power plant, so they know what coal mill is. So then the interviewer asked me that, Naveen, if you had to set up an extra coal mill, what would be the points that you would use to convince the management? So now under such circumstances, so probably you need the technical knowledge, you need the right figures, you need a lot of factors that on which a certain coal mill, the establishment of certain coal mill is very is based on, right? So amalgamation of all these things were very important in the answer. So at that point, so basically when he asked me that question, I asked for a minute's time, and it was very important to get the answer in a structured fashion, else that would have been a total flop. And luckily the answer came out right, and the rest of the interview was, so mostly it was all centered around the working, so the rest all questions were pretty much standard. But when it came to, once again, when it came to the HR interview was also, it was a very smooth interview for me, very jolly interview. And I so it so this is my advice to all the people who are watching here, that so try to be uh, as candid as possible in any interview, because so that is when the best answers come out. So if you're too much over prepared, if you're memorized all the answers, what I will answer when the person asks me that question, your answer is not going to be to the mark, and you will, in at some point of time, you're going to mess with it. So make sure that okay, it's very important for you to know the key points, that okay, this is what I'm going to answer for this question, but that's all.
Right.
And yeah, that's it from my side.
Right. Sudhama, I would like to come to you. Anything that stood out for you during your interview? I mean, you took back something, any learning that you have had, or anything of that sort that has happened in the interview that you think that had made or break your chances?
So yeah, PNG actually was the first shortlist I had during the process, and they have a very lean shortlist also, and they take long interviews. As you said, like so we had like 3 back-to-back interviews. Some point of time, I felt like, like I should get out of from this process. That's how tedious kind of thing it was, but it was fun actually, because everything was from CV. So what all 40 odd points you put on CV, if you are confident about that, that should work. And one thing I think which worked out was they were actually drilling on each and every point. Like they were picking like 5 to 6 points in each round, and they were actually testing whether this particular person have worked properly on this or not, and what is the kind of outcome, like what is the kind of impact that he has shown there or not. So they were particularly testing, and they were testing consistency in answers throughout the rounds. So I think that worked well. But during the process, I felt like, so since I had like complete factory work ex, so and the interview was also going in a similar way, I was thinking like, will I also get again back to a factory role after MBA? But luckily not. During summers, I got into some other different role in product supply.
Right. Uh, Akshay, I have a direct question for you. Mohin Khan is asking, how is procurement and supply chain consulting different from traditional supply chain management industry firm? And I think it's a very important question. And you being the lone person here from the SCM consultant role, uh, you're the best fit for it. Please go ahead.
Sure, Paul. So first, you'll have to understand that the major difference between consultants and when you work for, let's say, operations firms, for a consultant, you're expected to be a generalist. They do not expect you to go in depth and specialize with one function. So in operations, you might be working with warehouse, you might be managing a logistic function, you could be a category manager with Amazon, you could work across functions. But what they need in consultants is to look from a broader perspective. And if I say what kind of skill is needed, it's just like a normal consultant, right? You have to be a problem solver. There's not much difference. So I think he also asked about what preparation is needed or what is needed in an interview. So it's a similar kind of an interview. They will be looking into your problem solving skills, where case studies, where guesstimates, and it won't be much different from, let's say, a normal consulting interview. And they do not expect you to know a lot about supply chain, because they expect that when you join the firm, you will be working across different domains, right? So you will have to learn that on the go. So what they see is that, can you comprehend information quickly? If you are given can you ask the right questions? And that's what they look for.
Right. Okay. Mayank, I'll quickly come to you. We were talking about the kind of, skills that you need to have, the CV, the interview process and everything. I would go a little further from here. to know, what are the key functions that supply chain and operations executives work on. So when you first go in there, and you were mentioning this as well, that it's not just one thing that you do. If you can elaborate a little bit on that, and what is the kind of scope that is there, the overall scope of supply.
Sure. So to start with, I'll begin with supply chain and then move to operations. So in supply chain, if you see, it's all about it starts with planning. So you have the numbers from sales, you have the forecast for the for the coming year, and then you see how do you plan your operations, how do you pass it on to the factory. Okay, this is the amount of this is the amount of products that we need to have. This is the distribution across different SKUs and different products, so as to ensure timely delivery to the warehouse and then to the end customer for that matter. So one is definitely planning. Planning again has demand planning and supply planning, which are two different aspects there. Then you have one part which is logistics, which takes care of the warehouse and see whether the proper material, the raw material is coming to the factory, and then the finished good from the factory is reaching the warehouse for that matter. So this is the second bit, which is logistics. Third bit I would say is more related to customer excellence, or the experience part. So as to see whether the products that are going are of the right quality and at the right time. So if I have to sum up, it will be taking the products at the right time, in the right amount, and with the right quality at the right place. So this is to sum up what a supply chain does. And moving to operations, so operations again, factory operations has two three different bit. One is where you're closely working with the shop floor people and ensuring the efficiency bit, and seeing that the various KPIs that you have, that is the key performance indicators. It can include various fronts on the quality, it can include the efficiency bit, it can include timely delivery and all. So that will be one bit from the operations part. Next would be, which is more of a governance role, so that is industrial engineering. So if I have to say in very very simple words, industrial engineering is basically the function that governs all the key performance indicators. So they see whether the efficiency is being met, and if the various parameters for the day or for the say month, or as we call it in Mars, the periods are being met and all.
Right. All right. Thank you, Mank, for that answer. Abhijit, I'll quickly move to you. I have something that you might not have, experienced so far. I want to know the future of supply chain and operations. What, according to you, are the things that are going to change? What according to you are the skills that I'm going to be needing to have in myself to, excel in a field where I'm going in next?
Right. Okay. So I'll say whatever I've experienced and what I've read and what I know RB is going to do in the next few years. So I interned with supply planning vertical, and I felt this is a time where a lot of things are moving away from Excel spreadsheets and other such tools towards more sophisticated tools that uses ML, AI, and all the other aspects, all the other deep techs that's coming up. And supply 4.0 is a very talked about term in the supply chain management domain, one of the key aspects of Industry 4.0. When I was part of RB itself, what I came to know was how Auto ML is going to be used for marketing analytics and demand and supply planning, and how that will be taken forward. So I personally believe, and there are transformation managers involved with such projects. Obviously, there needs to be one person from the firm side to make sure that whatever we need is getting done, and best way to implement the same, right? So I feel that maybe having a tech background in line with what supply chain needs, with all the technical aspects of supply chain, is one big win a person can have when we talk about future of supply chain.
Right.
And second, yeah, and
Yeah,
second is everything is becoming heavy on data. So data analytics is one other aspect of Industry 4.0. And most of the concepts that we learn in B school also, especially in the second years, if you take up electives that are operation specific, is a lot about data. We had a course on machine learning itself. Then we have a course on demand and business forecasting. So all of these things give you a small intro into what goes into supply chain, what are the technical aspects that go into supply chain. It's basically statistics, and I think someone with statistics background definitely will ace in all that. It's very difficult even for engineers who have learned operations research in engineering, won't be able to catch so easily. It's difficult. And we also use a lot of softwares like R and Python and so on to do the same. So I think if you can do that earlier to the course, or if you can, augment your own knowledge by taking such small courses from Coursera or something, it'll go a long way in making sure that you have the technical aspects that are typically not present in all the others who might already be there in the organization. You will
Right.
actually be giving them a USP with which you can augment their value.
Absolutely. And Harshit, on that note, I'll come to you because we were talking about big data, we are talking about technology, and Amazon can't be, sidestepped on both these points. And I would like to, you to take a stab on how the future of e-commerce supply chain looks like. What do you think is going to change, and what are the kind of things that you need to ace or excel in to be, on top of your game?
I think a lot of what Abhijit talked about sort of would resonate here as well. When you talk specifically, as I've already said, there's a difference in primarily large logistics. That's an add-on as to what we do in FMCG as well. So where you get that, and when you're trying to study customer trends or delivery trends, trying to identify where bottlenecks are, and when you're trying to do that, you have tons and tons of customer data that you have, and in order to take any potential stab at what the problem is, you would need to analyze that data. So I think being comfortable with that, even if it's in basic Excel and you're just writing VBA codes, macros, and just converting that into usable thing, or you're using Power BI or you're using R, Python, depending what the amount of data that you have. So you need to be sort of be comfortable with it. That is, I think, a lot of where supply chain roles in e-commerce would move to. Analyzing the big data that is there to sort of identify where the problems are. Focus a lot more on that, because operations, to me at least, has always been about problem solving and just making sure that everything is running as smoothly as possible. Trying to sort of reduce waste wherever there is. So when you're trying to do that, and after a particular certain point of time, specifically a company like Amazon, which is running so efficiently for such a long time, and they have had been at, they have been at it for a long time. So for them, whenever you go in there, the use of data becomes specifically very important. That is something that was, the case with me in my internship as well. I had to work with a lot of data, and that was something I focused on. Apart from that, I think what Abhijit talked about regarding subjects as well, that there are certain subjects, the use of stats is of course going to increase, because you will need to sort of, from a demand planning perspective, you need to be comfortable with statistics a lot more. So, that almost goes hand in hand with data analytics right now. So I think that is something that a lot of people need to focus on, if they are planning to go into e-commerce supply chain.
Right. Sudhama, very quickly, whatever you learn in the classroom and then you go in the field, and then you see that there is a bit of a difference, I would say. I have not done it. So I would like you to comment on it. Do you think that whatever classroom learning that you get is enough to get yourself started in this big bad world of supply chain and operations, or you explore new things every day?
Yeah, I think it is more than enough in one way, and not sufficient in the other way, because uh, uh, suppose if whatever, like,
That's a very nice answer, Sudhama. I'm really impressed.
maybe that is a typical MBA answer, I guess. But as Abhijit and Harshit said, in terms of like whatever we learn in terms of data analytics and all statistic related stuff, I think that will equip very well enough for us to do good in internships and our projects. But apart from that, what I personally feel is there are many other strategic aspects which we as fresh or young people are unaware, and that is where I think we have to understand things from the company culture of company, talking to people in company and all. Apart from that, yeah, I have a like slightly different take also on this data and all. is definitely a strong tool in ops and supply chain. But over and above that, I think what makes a strong manager is his intuition, and that comes with a lot of reading and researching. Where you can take better decisions by using data. So I think taking insights from your strategy courses, like some frameworks, etc., will definitely help you to structure your projects and have a proper approach during your internships.
I think Akshay, you will definitely agree with what Sudhama is saying here, because it's something that you as a consultant might be facing and doing in your job right now. Do you want to enlighten us a little bit on that?
Or I think I'll resonate with Sudhama here. It's exactly like that. It's a structured thought process, at least for consulting, that really helps. And as you mentioned, the domain knowledge you develop from the subjects, that's really helpful. The skills you get with respect to, let's say, using an Excel solver, maybe optimization, even the algorithms, some of the algorithms you learn with respect to optimization, maybe inventory management, all that really comes handy, because even as a consultant, you made use of those. Sometimes it happens, you have to actually go into the books and see, okay, this was the algorithm we learned, and probably apply it, because you forget a lot of things, with time. So the books actually come handy, but obviously a person who's working in the industry has a lot more knowledge. That's why stakeholder interviews definitely, comes handy as well.
Right. Okay. I'll now move to Mayank. We are talking a lot of business right now, and I want us to, feel a little less formal right now. And uh, let me know, Mayank, what excites you? I mean, what is there which is the fun side of supply chain and operations? If you can, give us some examples or days of your life and you experienced something which actually motivated you to continue doing what you're doing.
So one thing, what I feel the best is, you can see things happening right in front of you. For example, in sales, you have to come up with a scheme, and you don't know whether that particular scheme will work or not, and then you have to see a lot of things. But in operations, you see, you have the results right in front of you. You do something, and that immediately transforms either in form of efficiency of the plant, or uh, improved service levels or something. So that is one bit which I feel is the most exciting part for me, because whatever I do is transforming right in front of me into a form which benefits the company in a larger way then.
Right. Naveen, you want to take it? What makes you, what keeps you going in the company that you're doing?
Yeah. So, I would like to draw some insights from the internship. Okay. So it was basically three words: uh, frustrating, exciting, and learning. Is how I would summarize the entire duration of 2 months. So frustrating, definitely, obviously. People were actually pretty much overloaded with their work. Getting time out of them was one major bottleneck. Most of us here on the call, or almost most of the interns who did the summer, uh, they all have faced the same problem. Exciting because this situation was something really new for all of us, and also learnings, because every time you talk to a new stakeholder. So one of my projects involved talking to stakeholders from multiple functions. So I had interactions with demand planners, I had interactions with supply planners, I had interactions with artworks, procurement, factory. So so when I sort of conducted interviews with all of them, I got to learn a lot of aspects related to one single project, and the different viewpoints that each one of these stakeholders had with respect to that certain process. So it's a plethora of information that is coming, that is coming for you, right? So hence that was a very exciting part. So because you were the person, you had certain capacity in your hand to simplify that process, increase the efficiency of that process, right? So it's your onus that you draw some insights from it, you make it more simpler, you erase the bottleneck. So the entire onus is on you. So having that responsibility, it was very exciting for me, and
Right.
seeing that transform into something great at the end of the internship, so it's even better. So
Right.
that is where I drew my excitement from the entire process.
Absolutely. Sudhama, what about you? Where do you find your joy?
Fun part which I felt so I was already in an ops role pre-MBA. So post MBA, the fun part is like uh, everything which happens around you impacts your business, and you'll feel it. For example, if you like see like there is a close down of all these unauthorized um, uh, slaughterhouses in Uttar Pradesh, your supplier comes back and says like we want a hike in price, or like if there is some kind of strike where farmers are doing in Bihar for lower produce like lower prices on their farm produce, and you have to take the decision of going out in the market and procuring it. So these things are the fun part. Like you understand like what are the things going on and apply it while making your decisions. Maybe like tax laws, or like what are the incentives like government is giving, like PLI schemes, etc. So all these things will directly impact you, and that is the best part like which I felt during internship.
Right. Harshit, what about you? Do you also think that real-time changes excite you, or there is something more to it?
Yeah, to me as well. I think it's the same thing, and it'll be the same. I think for most as well, because operations or supply chain is something you see a tangible output, right? And you see it much more instantaneously than you would see in any other function. So it's more to do that there's instant gratification there that you have made a change. You have let's say you thought that okay, this was the bottleneck, let's fix it through this, and you make that change. You instantaneously see okay, suddenly the numbers are going up. You are seeing lower number of sortation errors. You're seeing lower number of anything that and you're seeing increase in efficiency, and all of that sort of just you sort of feel like a very smart problem solver at that time, right? Because you have taken a decision, it has materialized very positively for you. You're seeing a tangible output and you're seeing it instantaneously. I mean, where exactly does that happen anyways, right? In finance, you would have to wait for the markets to push up. Sales, you will have to wait till the month end to actually get some positive output. But in operations, you get it instantaneously. So that is what to me is it as a problem solver. At least, trying to solve a problem, that to me is very satisfying, that I'm getting instant gratification I can see through my own eyes. I'm not seeing it through, some proxy data that someone else is sending me.
Right. Abhijit, very quickly, what are you looking after for? I mean, now when things are opening up, you are also, uh, surely will move to companies and, full-time roles and going in person and seeing supply chain and operations back to as we have seen always. How excited are you about that?
So for me, operations, I personally believe that end to end, everything can be automated. And what we as management people involved in operations role is looking for continuous improvement. No one gets stuck, likes to get stuck in the same place or to reinvent the wheel, right? But in operations, I feel we are given the unique opportunity to keep moving forward. Everything that we do is on continuous improvement. And the pandemic just accelerated that process a lot, I feel. A lot of decisions were made. Suddenly, a lot of new problems were identified. Now, post pandemic, once everything opens up, it's again, we know that these are the problems in the supply chain. Now, next is what? Continuous improvement. And that's where I see we know the problems now. Now, let's start working on the solutions. And I'm really excited to see those materialize and be a part of that transformation. I think we are all in a really good situation to learn so much about operations and all the issues associated with it and work on them.
And I'm sure for all that, Akshay, these people and the companies, they are all going to need your services. So how are you, looking at it from here on?
Right, Paul. So I think if I talk about the fun part for me, I think it's primarily the learning curve, because for a consultant, typical project would span from, let's say, 3 months to 6 months. So you get to work across the functions. So probably some of these guys would be working for FMCG, some will get to work in e-commerce. We get to work across the functions. We'll work across industries. We work across different functions. I could be doing a sourcing project today. After 6 months, I could be reducing the cost for maybe a truck operator, right? So that is the part that really excites me. So I'll just give you an example from my internship. I was working for a category called non-destructive testing. Now, it's a very small part of an MRO spend. Now, I have never heard about non-destructive testing. And in a 6-week internship, I had to understand the category, work on that, and do a supply negotiation project. So that is the part that really excites me.
All right. With that, with all that excitement, with that all that future thinking and going beyond this whole pandemic situation and starting to work on our own capacities, I will wind this up uh, this evening. Thank you all for joining on 24th of December, just before the Christmas hits. And a very happy Christmas, Merry Christmas to all of you, and a very happy New Year to all of you. And I hope that you all have a fulfilling career ahead and make a lot of money. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining in.
Right.
Thanks a lot, Paul.
Thanks a lot.
Right. Thank you,
Thank you,
Paul.
Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Sorry, guys, I was just